The kid can't get better, but that is a very, very poor starting point, even if you want to historically look at other guys' debuts and how they looked. It's not just the numbers. It's not just the raw numbers. It's the everything about the performance. I get it that nobody around him helped him, but even when nobody around Brian Hoyer was helping him, there was a certain level of professionalism that was not there in that Browns offense yesterday. It was as rudimentary as could be, and it was obvious from beginning to end.
Well, you're very right. I will say this, though. There's a whole lot of 2020 hindsight going on yesterday and today, and I'm sure in the days ahead. As far as I recall, last week, you and I were both pretty much of one mind, and that was to say, that the Hoyer defenders pretty much had no more arrows left in the quiver. That even those of us that were reluctant to see Manziel play, that were pretty much on board with the idea that it was time. I think you and I both said that a week ago today when we were on the phone, and so the idea that we're going to criticize the front office, or we're going to say attribute their motives in starting Manziel to one thing or another. I heard you talking about bringing some revenue out of the guy in this one last home game.
I do, Dan. I do think that the last home game of the season was part of the consideration process. Absolutely, man. I think that that may be. I will say that we knew from the start that people around the country that were saying the Browns ought to draft Manziel because they need to sell tickets. Well, not really. The Browns, sell a lot of tickets. They sell, 68, 70,000 seats every week. And ticket sales isn't the biggest motivator. But one thing we did see yesterday, I think, Jerry, is that first of all, let's take as a given that offense in the NFL is hard. Okay, it's hard to get a first down, let alone a touchdown in the NFL against the defenses we see. Everybody has that issue, and if you don't have a stud at quarterback, it's even harder to do that. What we saw yesterday was, evidence to me that Johnny Manziel is a gimmick. Johnny Manziel is a novelty quarterback. He's not a guy to be taken seriously as an NFL quarterback now or ever. I was afraid that was the case. I'm now more than ever convinced that it is the case, that we had other considerations other than the long-term health of the franchise in mind when they used the 22nd pick in the NFL draft to take this guy. I didn't like it then. I sure as heck don't like it now, because it doesn't look like he'll ever be anything other than and that's not how you win in the NFL. Now, Dan, let me jump in, because you're right, and I know where you're going because of how I started the show. And brother, I can definitely take the heat, and I know where you're going, but I don't think I was being unfair, because here's what you just said, the end of that, about where Manziel is. My belief is the Browns knew that all along. Now, you can't say, see, we did not know the X factor, which is what does Manziel look like behind the scenes, and what do they know that we don't know? So us not knowing, you do go, well, we would like to get a spark out of the quarterback position, so it naturally makes sense that you would try the backup quarterback. But to me, the reason that I said what I did at the beginning, and I'm glad you brought that up because I can be more specific, is that everybody knew, I think, that's hands-on with the Browns, what level Manziel has been behind the scenes. I do believe the Browns knew that. So to me, if you know that and you still make the decision to see what we've got, then yeah, there are other factors involved than just we need to try to get a spark at the quarterback position. Because if you knew that he was at that gimmicky, that rudimentary of a level, then clearly you knew that there was no chance to win that game when you made that decision.
Yeah, I'm not 100% convinced of that. I would, and that's based on comments that you hear from players. Like I heard some quotes from Josh Gordon, after the game, talking about how everything looked great in practice. how all the plays worked in practice, but when you hit the field, it doesn't work like it worked in practice.
Dan, did you hear the one yesterday? I was laughing when I was sitting in the locker room at my show. I told the whole locker room this, and everybody looked at me like it was the dumbest quote ever. The way, and maybe it was paraphrased on Twitter, but somebody had put the quote from Josh Gordon as, "We had a great game plan, it just didn't work in the game." And it was like an oxymoron, because if the game plan was great, then it would have worked in the actual game. You know what I mean? Like, it was too funny that he said that. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, going into the thing, at this point, I guess maybe evaluating the talent on your roster is more important than winning one or two or three of the last three football games. Certainly, it makes sense from a standpoint of prudence and talent evaluation going forward, and you'll never know until you put them out there under fire what you've got. But I tell you, and I'm going to paraphrase what Dan Wetzel said in his column this morning about it. He said that, at the beginning of the game, there was this buzz, there was excitement, and there was this feeling that we were about to see, something new and something about the future, what's yet to come. And 60 minutes later, it felt familiar. It felt familiar, and that was so true at the end of that game. We've been there. In fact, I was sitting around last night trying to think of, and different songs were occurring to me. I thought, you really ought to send this to Jerry to use for some bumper music tomorrow. And one of them was that John Lennon song, "Starting Over," because that's really, when I was walking out of the place, that's really what I felt like. I went from that 7-4, hopeful feeling back to, oh my God, we're one of the worst franchises in the NFL, and we are once again looking for that savior quarterback that is going to take us to the level that we want to be at. And we are no closer to that right now than we were, when we had Spurgeon Wynn starting.
You know what? And, now that you say that,
so I really did feel that starting over hopelessness walking out of that place yesterday.
Well, it's funny that you say that. Did you know that was literally one of the worst games by the Browns going back to the first week of '99 when they got blown out by the Steelers? The only game where they ran less offensive plays since they've come back is that first game against the Steelers back in week 1 of 1999, and it's the first time they've been shut out since 2009. I mean, there were a lot of going back into the time machine and going, wow. But I'm with you, because you look at that, and when you hear that about going all the way back, and you could throw out all of these different, Manziel stats about what he did, but looking at the team as a whole, when you say, wow, you have to go back to the beginning of this whole thing. And, again, it's not the whole team that's that way. They are stripped down depth-wise, injury, all of that. I mean, I do think the Browns, I think we both think they're in a better place overall, but still so much more work to do. But do you agree with what I said, that especially if these next 2 weeks go the way I think you're insanely a homer, and I love to be hopeful, if you expect much better over the next 2 weeks of the season than what you saw. Maybe you'll get a little better effort because they're professionals, and maybe somebody will show up to play in these games. The Browns do occasionally show up in the games that you don't expect them to. So, but I think it's unreasonable to expect much more over the next 2 weeks. Doesn't that change the second half of this season? Doesn't that completely change the way 2014 feels from the way it should? Even if it ended 7-9, it should still feel different than it does right now.
Oh, yeah, I think so. And then, we talk every week, and I have not been filled with optimism. The team was 7-4, and I said I thought they might win one of their last 5 games.
You did? Yes.
I'm still hopeful that happens, but it hasn't happened yet, that one win. So, it's not that I've been unrealistic about the expectations. You could sort of see the wheels coming off and the injury-depleted roster, and really looked at the teams on the schedule, and it's kind of hard to project a victory or more than one victory, I guess I'd say. So yeah, but you're right. It's you hate to end the string. It's much like they did, of course, last year, where they lost the last 7 straight.
Yep. End of the season
here we're faced with the prospect of losing the last 5 straight, and it's going to put the same kind of smear on the memory of it and on the off season. It's weird. You have this little family that you sit with down there at the stadium. We've been with these guys for 15 years, and This is the 16th season, I guess it is, and you know, the last home game is you know, time for a little nostalgia, time for, you know, you wish people well and you shake their hands and it's Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and you've got stuff that you're passing around and sharing, you know, food and that other that sort of thing, and you're saying goodbye to people for another off season. You know, at this, by the second half, this was sort of you know, the game was secondary to you know, sort of your goodbyes to your friends that you've lived and died with, mostly died for 16 seasons, and so that was what was going on. And you sort of had to do it in a hurry after halftime because people were getting out of there. I was leaving with about 9 minutes left in the fourth quarter. We figured, well, there's no point in continuing this.
Yeah.
So we headed for the exits, and we were behind about 30,000 people who had left before us. But anyway, it was disheartening, and really I left with that familiar feeling of starting over. And like you say, the roster's in better shape than it's been in, and assuming the people that were injured come back strong. But there's so much to do, and you look back at 2 first-round picks, including number 4, and you think about what might have been if the Browns had drafted smartly in the first round.
Absolutely, because you know, we could go on to that. Let me ask you, and this is just us, but people know that you're a really, you know, level-headed guy. I love to bounce my crazy ideas off of you to see where you're at on stuff. And what I was talking about, I don't think you can understate the effect of the quarterback change. I think we talked about how people hoped it would bring a spark and do the opposite, but do you think, I mean, clearly, even afterwards, you know, Joe Thomas made a few statements after the game, and I wonder how that locker room truly did view this thing. And I'm sure, as usual, after the season, a lot of that stuff will come out and people's true feelings will come out. But part of me also has to believe that, like you said, what we saw and what everybody else saw, they already knew. And I just think that I think a lot of that was the effort. Because you've seen this team has played gritty ball all season long. No matter what, they've given you your money's worth. And it just felt like they said, you know what, you guys took a hike on us by doing this, and we're done playing for the season, man. And it's a shame because I hate to say it, because I think it's so wrong when teams do that. But, I mean, that's clearly what, to me, the body language of that whole team told me is, you guys are done, and so are we.
Yeah, maybe so. You know, it didn't start out with Johnny coming out and failing and falling flat on his face at the start of the game, because the defense came out and fell on their face first. You know, this team was down. Obviously, when you can't get a first down until the second quarter, you put your defense, you know, behind the 8 ball and make it even tougher for them. Maybe they did mail it in, Jerry. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Maybe last week was that last one, Dan. You were there. Maybe that Colts game was that one that when you don't win it. Remember, we talked earlier in the season about games that the Browns would have lost that they found a way to win and come back on. This felt like last week, felt like now looking ahead to this, felt like that was the one where they reached that point, the game that they lost at the end that broke them. For whatever reason, and then the quarterback, all of that stuff, it just felt like that was that last strong stand where they said, man, we can do this, and when they didn't, now. So what that says is that your team is a little better and deeper, because instead of that happening 8 weeks in or 10 weeks in, that didn't happen until the final couple weeks of the season, so at least it's progress, I guess. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it felt like maybe that Colts game was that last big, we're giving it our all, and they put Brian back out there, and that you had that they tried and they lost at the end, a game that they, you know, played very well, but that felt like maybe that backbreaker now, looking at how they came back out.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that there was an emotional letdown. The team didn't quite have the spring in their step yesterday, and that can be a function of, you can attribute that to the change of quarterback, or you can attribute it to the playoff hopes dying last week on the field against the Colts, and when they came so close and couldn't pull it out. So, you know, who knows on that? But you know, I just got to believe that, you know, they felt that the season was over after last week, and maybe there's an unconscious, you know, letdown that you know, you don't even expect to happen, and you get out there and you just don't have it. You know, I don't know. As far as Johnny goes, it couldn't have been any worse for him. Your caller made a great point. One of the things you need in the NFL is a guy who can, bounce around back there a little bit and take a shot and not go down. And pretty obvious that this kid at, I don't think he weighs 200 pounds, is never going to be able to withstand the beating. And a guy gets a hand on him. Guy gets a hand on his jersey.